Hey everyone, I'm Coral. Welcome to my channel. This is where we talk about how much mayonnaise is too much mayonnaise. Just kidding. Here we talk about books. And today I want to talk about something that maybe I could have done last month in January, but I was thinking about it, and since I didn't have a YouTube channel at the very end of 2018, I'd really like to go over some of the books that I really liked last year and some of the books that I really didn't like last year. So I'm going to start with the good ones first, and then I'll move on to the not so good ones. I picked 5 of each. It was kind of hard. Actually, it was harder for me to pick ones that I didn't like, which is probably a good thing. Obviously, there were a lot that I thought were just okay, but not too many that I thought were total shit. So here we are with my good pile. Okay, one of the best books I read last year was The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This is actually just the first part of the first book. So as you can see, this is a chunky series. This is a high fantasy. It's super epic. It has a lot of world building, some crazy magic system that even I'm into the second book now and I still don't really understand how it works. But not in a bad way, just like it's complex and like these characters don't know exactly how it works. So Brandon Sanderson is such a great storyteller and he makes incredible characters. Like if Stephen King were to write high fantasy, I think that would be a good comparison to how Brandon Sanderson writes his characters, if that makes sense. Like they have a King feel with their complexity. So this is the story of a few different people. We have a slave named Kaladin who works as a bridgeman, and he basically puts down bridges. He runs in front of the army with another group of bridgemen, and they put down bridges to span chasms so that the armies can cross the chasms, but they're like lower than infantrymen, so they're just getting killed. If you're a bridgeman, you're going to die. There's also the perspective of Dalinar Kholin, who is uncle of the king, so you get some politics in there. And there's also a woman named Shallan in here who is trying to apprentice for the king's sister, who is a scholar and a famous atheist in this world. So there's also that going on, and those are the 3 main perspectives that we see through this book. It was so good, it was so complex. Like I said, I'm in the middle of the second one right now, and it's one that I really relish while I'm reading it, so this is a good one. That was a chunky book. This one is a short little novella called Jack and Jill by Kaylin Patrick Burke. This is the second novella that I read of his. The first one I thought was good, but this one, oh my god. I was trying to parcel out my thoughts earlier when I was thinking about making this video, and just thinking about this tiny little story was giving me goosebumps because it's so full of like raw emotion. It's about a woman named Jillian who had a twin brother who died when they were younger. His name was Jack, and they were also abused by their father. So as an adult, she obviously has some issues she's trying to work out. She has issues sleeping. When she sleeps, she has these crazy nightmares. So it's kind of her trying to deal with that trauma, trying to revisit it as an adult to see if she can finally put it behind her. So this, obviously, if you can't handle sexual assault, don't pick this up because that is at the core of this book. But it was so good, it was so emotional, and it made me feel a lot of feels. Okay, here's another one that had me feeling things, and that is Brother by Anya Alborn. This book is about a teenage boy named Michael Him and his family live in the Appalachians, and they kidnap women, and I don't want to spoil anything, so they kidnap women, and Michael knows that this is not normal, and he knows that this is not right, but it's what his family does. So it's kind of a little tiny bit of like a coming of age, sort of, because he's a child trying to become a man and trying to reconcile the things that he's had to do and the things that his family does, even though he knows that they're not moral things, they're not good things. And, you know, does that make him a bad person? He doesn't really want to do these things, so how does he deal with that kind of shit? So another one that made me also feel feelings. There's also a lot of emotion in this book too, and I would totally recommend this if you have not read any of Anya Allborn's work. If you like horror, this is one you don't want to pass up. Okay, my last two of some of my favorite books last year are kind of in the same vein. The first one I'd like to talk about is one that I don't really see people talking about, which is really a travesty, and that is Perfect Days by Rafael Montes. This is translated from Brazilian, I believe. Yes, the author is from Brazil. So this is where that takes place. It takes place in Brazil, and the main character in this, his name is Teo, and he's kind of a loner and a weirdo. He is very intelligent, but not as intelligent as he thinks he is. He lives with his mother, so that's another dynamic in there, kind of like the overbearing mother that he wants to separate himself from but can't seem to. And Teo meets this young woman and he becomes obsessed with her, and he learns a little bit about her. He knows that she's trying to write this screenplay. She fancies herself a screenwriter, so he kidnaps her and comes up with this way to justify what he's done by telling himself, oh, I'm doing this so that she can finish her screenplay finally. So it's kind of a story where, since it's being told by the antagonist of the story, it kind of makes you sympathize with them, and I'm so game for that. It was so well written, especially being a translation, because, you know, just culturally, sometimes you can't translate certain things very well, but this was so good. This was so good. And yeah, I'd recommend it to anybody who liked my next book, which is You by Carolyn Kepnes. A lot of people know about this one, especially being that the television series just came out recently. This is about Joe, a dude who works in a bookstore. So you're like, oh, he works in a bookstore, it's perfect. And he's also just a weirdo, and he stalks this young woman named Beck, and he's basically doing anything to try to manipulate her into loving him. And it gets pretty messy, it gets very dark, it gets gory. This is one that, if things like stalking and assault, if those kinds of things really bother you, I would not read this, because it is dark. And even being in a pretty good place in my life when I read this, like emotionally and mentally, it still, I think, took a toll, and it was hard to read at some points, especially the end. And Perfect Days was like that too. The ending was very, very unsettling. So, great book, super dark, but would recommend. All right, now on to the 5 books that I thought were not so good last year. And I just want to come out and I want to say I'm not an author. I don't write books. So I don't want to seem, when I'm being critical, it's not like a personal attack on this person because I don't write books. I don't think I could. So I'm not in any way trying to disparage these authors. I just really did not like these books that they wrote. Take that how you will. So the first one on this list is a young adult fantasy. I believe it is either a series or a duology of Fire and Stars by Audrey Colhurst. This, I like fantasy, so I was like into this, and it's supposed to have a female-female romance. So I was like, cool, you don't get a lot of that in fantasy. There's a lot of that in like contemporary nowadays, like YA contemporary, but not in fantasy. So I was interested in it and I thought it was so fucking boring. I didn't finish it. And I try to do that as little as possible, especially if I want to be able to rag on it. Like I feel like I should read the work all the way through if I want a full informed opinion on it. But this was so bad that I quit reading it. I think I maybe got about halfway, and the female-female romance that was supposed to be happening was just... There were no sparks between these characters. I can't imagine that it would have been a believable relationship. Also, the names were super freaky. So like every time I would come into this like 15 letter long name, I would have to stop and like sound it out because my brain can't just like skip over that. I'd have to like go and like try to sound out. I shouldn't have to sound out a name. I'm a fucking adult. But I had to in this book. It was so stupid. So hated the names. I thought the romance was not romantic. It was bad. Okay, next up we have another young adult book. This one is called Roseblood by A.G. Howard. And you can tell I don't talk about these that much because usually I can recall the authors by the name of the book, you know. This I did not get very far into at all. This is like a retelling of Phantom of the Opera. First of all, the font is, oh my gosh. Oh, the font is red, if you can see that, which seems like that'd be cool. Like, oh, it's just not regular ass black lettering, but it was very hard to read. And that could be because I'm blind as fuck, but like it was not fun to read. The story did not spark any interest in me. It was very heavy-handed. I didn't finish it, so I can't tell you, you know, if it ended well. I think I got up to the part where the girl meets her roommate, who is named Sunny, and she's from like fucking Alabama. And I swear to God, she must have had like a stalk of hay sticking out of her mouth because that's how the author wrote this character. Basically, it was very, like I said, very heavy-handed. It didn't leave, from what I read, it didn't leave much up to the interpretation of the reader. It was very hand-fed information, and it was just not good. Like I didn't like these characters. I didn't give a shit about the Phantom, and like I really like the Phantom of the Opera movie that what's her face was in, Fiona Gallagher from Shameless. Oh, what's her name? Emmy Rossum? Anyways, that's not the point. Point is, this book was not good. Okay, third, and you know what? People might come after me if they watch this video, but another young adult book, Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas. I've been turned off young adult books for a while after last year. I just read so many dumpers, but this one was so boring, and I kind of knew that I wouldn't like this. Well, I kind of figured that I wouldn't like this because it branches off, and there is a main character that I just didn't give a shit about in the main plotline of the other stories. So like, why would I read a book specifically about him without the other characters? Like, I just knew that I wouldn't like this. He was the most boring ass character, so I didn't care what he did for 800 pages without the other group of people in this series, but for some reason that executive decision was made, and here we are with this long, tedious, arduous, just, we can come up with synonyms for fucking boring all day long, but this is what Tower of Dawn was. Okay, my next two books were kind of horror. This one, I don't even know how I would classify this. It says stuff about it being full of terror, but I read more than half of this and also didn't finish it because it was so goddamn boring. And the writing, the writing style of this author, I think it was beautiful. It was just like a quiet horror that was way too quiet for me. It was like somebody whispering like, murder, scary ghosts, into my ear. And I don't know, I don't even know, like, was there a scary part? I didn't finish it. I read so much and I kept expecting something horrifying to happen. And it didn't. It didn't. Nothing happened. I don't think anything happened. Okay, last but not least, I have here Tales from a Talking Board, which is one of the most beautiful books I've ever seen in my life. Whoever designed this cover was a genius. But this was an anthology centered around talking boards. There were like two stories in here that really stuck out to me. There was one by Christy DeMeester. I believe that was the very first story in this book that I really dug. And then there was another story in this about a kind of like a human sacrifice kind of a thing. And that one was really interesting too. But the rest of these were so boring. It took me so long to read this book, and I don't even think it was 200 pages. Oh, it was barely 200 pages. And it was just poo-poo. It was so boring, which was disappointing because, like, I mean, you can see this. It's a beautiful book. The stories inside were just shite. I don't know. Maybe I should have done those ones first and the better books last, but I didn't. And now here we are, and I don't know. I don't know how to feel. Anyways, those are some books I really loved and some books I really didn't love last year. I will see you guys in another video soon. Until next time, see you later, alligators.